thing is getting really, really clear on what role you want to apply to and your positioning.
I think that's where like career coaches uh, are really big on like the hidden job market, like referrals, the networking, going above and beyond with their application and actually saying, okay, like can we create a project or is there something that we can do to stand out?
So that's really kind of more what I focus on, is on making personal connections more so than going through that front door of applying to, hundreds of jobs. Most companies are not going to say, we're looking for an entrepreneur, right? Because what they want is an employee, but they want an employee who thinks like an entrepreneur.
All right, welcome back to this episode of the How to Get a Job podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the roller coaster that you're going to go through when you're looking for the job, especially emotionally. There's going to be full of up and downs in this journey. And trust me, if you're going through that right now, you're not alone. Every single person has gone through that. And so we're going to talk a little bit deeper today. And to do that, we have an amazing guest. We have Patricia Ortega. She is a board certified coach and founder of the Uncommon Career. Patricia, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, I'm excited for this conversation. Let's get started. Why do you think that job searching just plays such a mental role on job seekers?
Yeah. I think the biggest piece is the fact that our hiring processes in general are broken. They're really made to be man against machine. And the more we go into AI, the more it's man against machine. And when that happens, the person on the other side of the machine, right, the recruiter or the hiring manager, typically, obviously, it's a recruiter or HR, um, it's harder to see the person when they're one of 3,000, one of 300, right? And so it sets it up, not through any fault of anybody, but it sets the system up to make us feel not only not human, but also rejected, not accepted, not good enough. It makes even the most qualified candidate feel unqualified and incompetent in that job search. And it's really frustrating. It's a frustrating process.
Yeah, it's interesting because it feels like when you're a job seeker that the companies have all the leverage, but that if you talk to leaders, managers, executives, even CEOs, their biggest challenge is finding the right people. And I think a lot about it because like the internet made it so easy for you to apply online, right? Before you had to go. And when I started looking for jobs when I was 16 years old, I had to go to the physical location and fill an application. So I was limited to the amount of places that I can apply. But now with the internet, I can apply to places in California, New York, or somewhere else in the world. And so the internet has made it so easy for us to apply, but made it so hard for us to get noticed because now the companies have the leverage because every time they pull a job a position open, they get hundreds of applications. So what do you think candidates can do to prepare for themselves mentally and start kind of like understanding like, hey, being one of 300 applicants is kind of part of the process now?
Yeah. So part of the piece that I really like doing is we're working towards switching your mindset. So going from that, here's what the system has set up to be, and here's where naturally one side, humans on one side versus humans on the other, right? The recruitment team versus the candidate. Here's how we naturally fall into place and what the, you know, um, experience is going to naturally feel like. But it doesn't have to be that way. Because things are changing so quickly, this is an opportunity for the candidate to take a different approach. And it's actually an opportunity. Anytime you have a downturn in the economy and whatever, it's actually a really big opportunity for those who can see it. So while most candidates are going to feel ghosted and are going to have the rejection, I really like turning it on its head and saying, well, because we have so much more connectivity in AI, in social media platforms, and how the AI can kind of go through and find the right people and help you save time. We're kind of switching it. We're not actually taking the front door anymore, which is that easy apply button that everybody hits. Instead, we're going to talk about how do you communicate in a way that's persuasive, both in writing and verbally? How do we develop your brand? And then how do we take the side door, the door that your friend, your personal contact is going to bring you in through? So that's really kind of more what I focus on, is on making personal connections more so than going through that front door of applying to, hundreds of jobs.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that is why hiring a career coach is kind of gonna like it makes a big difference. It's because going through that applying for jobs is not a hard concept, right? Like especially now with LinkedIn or even like Indeed, Monster, they're all going to make it as easy as possible. Like it's like
Mhm.
one button. We'll pull your information from LinkedIn. We'll even build your resume for you. Like you have all these tools. And so if you're taking the easier route of going through like the path of less resistance, like one click easy apply button, then you're just getting lost in the sea of other applicants. And I think that's where like career coaches um, are really big on like the hidden job market, like referrals, the networking, going above and beyond with their application and actually saying, okay, like, can we create a project or is there something that we can do to stand out? And I
Mhm.
think, like to your point, that is the difference maker.
Oh, absolutely. And it's one of those pieces you said it. You said it's a person who goes outside of the norm, right? And most companies are not going to say, we're looking for an entrepreneur, right? Because what
Yeah,
they want is an employee, but they want an employee who thinks like an entrepreneur. And the
yeah,
employee who's going to look at the line and say, I'm not going to wait in that line. I'm going to open a door for myself here on the other side where no one's looking. I'm going to find that opportunity. Well, as creative as they appear on that side is how creative they're going to be perceived by their manager once they get in the door. But it's
yeah,
hard because those types of, human contact is more difficult than pushing a button. And I think that's where we kind of can get in our head, and we need that guide. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm a coach who hires my own coach, right? Like a
yeah,
coach for me, because I need someone to, whether it's help me get clarity, pump me up, keep my motivation up. When the dip goes down in my motivation, they're there to kind of help me out. And that's, I think, the purpose of a coach. It's not just the how to, but it's not just the what to do, but it's also the how to be, right? Like how to um, carry yourself, how to increase your confidence, how to increase the and elevate your communication. So all of those pieces, I think, are pieces that when we think about going into a career search, we don't really necessarily think about, but they make the biggest difference.
yeah. They do, and I think it's funny because getting a career coach is not as common as it should be,
Mhm.
and it's interesting because you've never meet a high achiever, whether it's an Olympic athlete. You know, we're recording this during the Olympics. Every Olympic athlete there has a coach, right? I also have never met a CEO who doesn't have a coach. I've also
Mhm.
never met a singer who doesn't have a coach, or like or an athlete who doesn't have a coach. You talk about like the greatest of all time athletes; they all have coaches. Like Michael Jordan had a coach, Tom Brady had a coach,
Yeah.
and so like how are you like how are we even expecting that to do greatness or to achieve something big if we don't have the support too? And the higher you get into the success ladder, the more coaching is normalized, but it's not normalized in other areas. And I think
Mhm.
that's, to your point, is it's not that like you couldn't do this alone, you just takes longer or there takes more failures. With a coach you have somebody, the third party person that's giving you a different perspective, that's helping you avoid some of the biggest downfalls. It is, to me, coaching is one of the biggest time hacks, is one of the biggest shortcuts you can take in life.
Oh, absolutely. Especially because when you talk with a coach, and this is the part that, I'll be honest with you. Like, I come from a first generation household, right? We didn't have a ton of money growing up. And so I grew up with this money mentality of like, oh no, I just do the DIY and I figure it out myself and it's going to be less expensive. Well, when you look at your career is a money making machine, right?
Yeah,
Like your career is your business. If we can get you to a 15, 20K increase, I mean, think about that. Let's say every year. And in addition to that, if let's say you get that 15K increase, like even what is it, conservative,
yeah,
15K increase in the first year, right? Coaching has paid for itself twice fold, three times fold,
yeah,
right? But now every job you go to after that, you're commanding a salary based off what your prior salary is. Everybody asks. And of course, you don't want to give that right away. But when it is time to share what your prior salary is, now you forever will have that 15K increase year after year.
yeah, yeah. No, it is for sure. I think one of the best investments that you can make in your career is a career coach who understands the market, that understands your industry, that can like help you even just a salary negotiation piece alone. Like they know what your skill set is worth in the economy. Because at the end of the day, like who determines your pay is the market. It's not necessarily
Mhm.
the company. It's not necessarily you. It's the supply and demand for the skill sets that you have.
Mhm.
And that's just massively impactful when you have somebody on your side that's helping you navigate this and kind of even out the playing field. But one of the things is, and I want to kind of talk about a little bit more, is if I'm a job seeker and all
Mhm.
I do is go on LinkedIn and all I see is I'm happy to announce I got a job at this. I'm happy to announce that can play a very mental role, like a
Mhm.
mental like toll on my mindset because I feel like everyone else is being successful and I am not. How do you
Mhm.
suggest handling that? Like the social media, the FOMO that everyone else is successful but I'm not.
Yeah. Here's the thing. You're going to see a lot of videos that are kind of trying to talk you out of that mentality, which is great. And those videos sound something like, you know, everyone posts their best 5 minutes, right? And what they don't post. So all the people that aren't posting, they're posting. When you do post, you post a success. And when you don't post, that's normal life. And it's helpful to know that, but that only goes so far. It's like an iceberg, right? That's the surface piece, your perception of it. But as you go deeper and under the water where the things that you don't see of yourself and of the process, that's where so there are frameworks like your belief system, your worldview, right? The way you perceive things, right? And if you think before you ever started the career search that you were in any way incapable, not as qualified, if you go in there thinking already that, maybe I'm not going to get this job, everything around you is going to be a self fulfilling prophecy. If
Yeah.
you go in there with confidence, then this is on top of the iceberg, right? So this is above the water. So when you see those posts, it's not going to impact you quite as much and you're going to have more resilience because the anchor, the piece at the bottom is not going to be it's not going to be weighing you down. So
Yeah.
that's part of what we work on is okay, this situation's happening now. This is an event. But the way you interpreted that event, is that a pattern? Meaning, is that something that, outside of career, when you see something that you like, do you wonder why you don't have it? Like, right? Is this a pattern in our thinking? Or is it a full on, structure? Is it a full on, deeply ingrained, deeply embedded system that is part of your worldview that we might need to refer over into counseling, right? But where as a coach, I tend to work in like the patterns. This is a pattern that's evolving. I'm kind of in a cycle. It keeps reinforcing itself, but we need to get out. But it's
Yeah.
not yet a structure to where it's literally immovable. It's just how we've always been all our life.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So if I were to say, okay, Patricia, I am a brand new job seeker. I am not happy at my job, right? What how should I get started? Is there like a step, a framework? What should I be considering?
Yeah. So if you're a brand new job seeker, I would say first thing, don't touch your resume. That's not the first thing to do. You want to get really, really clear. And this is the piece that I think is the hardest. It is. It is the hardest piece for almost everybody I work with. You have to be really clear on what you want. And in order to get clear, you have to dip your foot in the water. You have to dip your toe in the water. So you have to go out and have conversations with people in the role or hiring for the role, or who have recently been in the role that you're interested in. Because as you get into those conversations, you're going to further confirm whether this is the role or not. And the reason why that's so important is because oftentimes we want to go straight to our resume, but then we want to apply to project manager and marketing director, all these different roles that don't have too much to do with each other. And so now the branding is going to be scattered. And if the branding's scattered, it's not going to make an impact. So the very first thing is getting really, really clear on what role you want to apply to and your positioning. What exactly do you have in your career history, in your personality style, in, maybe even personal qualities? What do you have that is going to position you for those roles and who in that particular industry is in a stage where they need what you have, right?
Mm,
So for a lot of companies, like here's an example. I just worked with someone where she's like, I don't really have a ton of experience. Every time I keep working with startups and then they scale up. And then once they're big, then I feel like I kind of get bored because I really like, the scaling piece. She's like, so no one's going to want to work with me because, companies that are big are already big or whatever. Well, what you realize is We know exactly who's looking for her. And there's
Yep.
so many startups right now who are growing so quickly. They really need an HR person. So we positioned her for that. And she actually got hired without even applying. So she got a job like well before she even started the mass application system. So that helps a lot.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's like people skip the clarity part. People skip that because they're so eager to start applying and they think they need the resume. But if you don't know, making sure that you're applying to the right places or networking with the right people, you might be wasting a lot of time. It's like, what's better, going 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction or 1 mile an hour in the right direction? And people were like, oh, going fast. But how do you know? Did you ever take the time to know and look at the map or look at the GPS that you're going in the right direction? And clarity is not one to skip. And it's funny because like you and your client took the time to identify what made her happy, what she enjoyed, and
Mhm.
because she had a very clear target what she was looking for, it made it really easy for the company to hire them because they're like, okay, you're the perfect candidate. Like,
Yeah, she spoke directly to, directly to what they needed. And yes, her pool of potential companies was smaller. That's on purpose. If you're
yes,
if you're not speaking specifically to the person who needs you, then everyone else is going to see you and think that you're for them. You're going to start getting to interviews where people are just not interested.
yeah.
And so this is where you have you think you have bad luck or you're not a good interviewer, but it's really because you didn't go in the right direction.
Yep. Yeah, it's so much similarity to that. And even when you think about running a business where like it's the niches, like the riches are in the niches. Like, sure, you might only have 15 companies that are hiring for that particular role
Mhm.
because you've niched down so particularly. But even if you're one of 200 people that apply for that role, because your profile, your background, your experience, your aspirations are so dialed into that role, you're just going to clearly stand out. And I'm telling you, like managers and hiring managers, like they struggle. Like they're like going through interviews and they're like, I just want to find one person. They don't want to interview 300 people. If they found the right spot before even opening up the role, like to this point, you didn't even apply. Um,
Mhm.
that's like such a winning combination. So we have clarity. What's step two?
Yeah. So first get a ton of clear. I mean, you have to be crystal clear.
Yeah.
Once you have that, then it's going into, and positioning kind of sits between clarity and building your brand, right? That's the first piece you build. But then it's going into branding. And I prefer to kind of go with your career story first. So
Yeah.
I know often we start with resume. I like starting with career story where I literally take at least a couple hours and ask you about every detail about your work, right?
Mhm.
Why was it challenging? Why were you frustrated? Why was your boss frustrated? What happened here? What did it lead to? What if you weren't here, right? All of these different questions that get at, pain points, challenges, desires, things you've overcome, outcomes, etc. And so once we have all of that, what we have is a series of career stories where it's really clear at that point because we took the time. It's really clear at that point, you know, what your main three stories should be that you should pull from to highlight on the resume, that you should pull from to highlight in networking conversations, and that you should pull from to highlight in your interview. And believe it or not, the same 1 to 3 stories is all you need for your all of your branding.
Hmm. Look,
Yeah.
so is there? So we have clarity. We have the stories. What comes next? The resume, the networking, like pretty much like what would be like the outline of how we should be sequencing this?
Yeah. So, how I typically work with clients is we do the clarity piece. From there, we do the branding, which is resume, LinkedIn,
Oh,
career stories, and even get a little bit into the interview piece just to kind of have a little bit of prep. But once we have all the marketing set, then it's another. So, when we first start, we start with networking because that's how you get clarity. So, it's two different types of networking. One is to see what's out there, get a pulse, grab that clarity piece. But then we go back into networking with companies, specifically with decision makers, and we start conversations with them. It's a totally different conversation. We guide you step by step on what that conversation is typically like, specific phrasing you can use just to start with to kind of get comfortable with it and find your own way. So, clarity, branding, networking, and once your networking and job search system is underway, which is a lot less applications. I promise you, every single person I work with, they take care of applying for jobs. I never have to tell someone, hey, have you applied for jobs this week? They take care of applying for jobs. What I always have to check on is how many decision makers did you talk to this week? How many emails did you send out? That's the piece that is difficult. So clarity, branding, and then the networking piece. And by then we start getting into interviews a little bit, and it just kind of goes from there.
As it flows. As we wrap it up, if people listening to this and they're like, "Oh my God, Patricia, would love to learn more about how to work with you," and like I can definitely see the path and why your clients are so successful. What is the best way for them to learn more about your services and to connect with you?
Yeah, I like personal connections, and so if you, I'll give Daniel the link, but if
Yeah,
you hit me up on LinkedIn, just tell me, "Hey, I heard of you on the How to Get a Job podcast." I'll connect with you because sometimes, people just randomly connect, and I really wanna know you. So if you listening to the podcast, hit me up on LinkedIn, connect with me, and then we'll go from there.
perfect. So
Mm.
if you're listening to this, we'll put a link to Patricia's LinkedIn right below so you can connect with her. Thank you all so much for listening. If you haven't already liked and subscribed or leave us a review, that's like the only favor we ask. We don't run ads here. It's all content for you. We want to make sure you're successful and you land your dream job. Patricia, thank you so much for being here, and we'll catch you guys all on the next episode.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.